I don't normally use this time to talk about my mission trips to India, but I felt like I wanted to share a story with you. I was attending a pastor's conference I had been invited to speak at, and it was in northern India. And while I was there, a man who lived in that city in northern India had heard that I was in the area. I'm not sure the connection, but he heard about my work among the poor in India, and himself being a very devout Hindu and a rich man, invested a lot of time and money into helping the poor of the Indian people. Well, I worked out with the team there at the conference center that I could take a few hours away, and he came and picked me up. He had an entourage of 3 SUVs. He had bodyguards. He had all these staff with him. They presented me with flowers, enough flowers that if I were to bring them home, they would cover my dining room table with all the leaves in them. It was kind of overwhelming. Well, he showed me some of his relief projects, some wells that he had dug for the poor people in their villages, as well as an orphanage that was being built. And then afterwards, we went to a very expensive, exclusive restaurant for lunch. And while we were there, the staff, his senior staff, kind of left for about 45 minutes. And when they came back, they brought gifts for me. And they had been asking questions about my family. Like, for instance, what about your wife? And I said, well, she loves to cook and she loves Indian food. So they presented me with several authentic Indian cookbooks. And it was just a great, overwhelming time of me receiving all this stuff. We went back to his offices and he showed me some of the projects they were working on, the land development that he was doing. That was what he did professionally. Then they took me back to the camp where I was staying. And last thing he asked me when I got out of the vehicle was, could I spend the next day with him, because he wanted to introduce me to his family. Well, I worked it out that I was able to spend the day with them. Of course, next morning, the SUVs came, the entourage came, the guards came with their weapons, and they took me to his home. I met his family. We had a wonderful meal, and it was a great time there with them. Then we went back to a different set of offices that he had. It was closer to his home. And while we were there, he and myself and his senior staff were sitting around the conference table, and the Lord spoke to me and said, now. And I had been praying for an opportunity to share Christ. And so I began to share with them the gospel, and all of them being Hindus, being able to explain how Christ was different from all the other gods. And they understood well, they understood English well, and there was no communication barrier. And we got to the point where I said, would you like to commit your life to Christ? And I looked at each one of them and asked them, specifically to them, would they like to commit their lives to Christ? And they all did. And we prayed together and they all committed their lives to Christ. I gave Mr. D my Bible. I told him to start reading the book of John. And as I was leaving, I was out at the curb about to get in the SUV, and he took my hand and I said, thank you so much for your hospitality. And he bowed his head down and he wouldn't look at me. And I said, thank you, thank you. And he lifted his head up and there were tears coming down his face. And he said, no, thank you for Jesus. It was so overwhelming for me. Why do I share that? Well, there's a verse in Psalm 119:46. It says this, I will speak of your statutes before kings and not be put to shame. God wants to put people in our lives that we can speak the gospel to. They may be royalty. They may be great influential people. They may be average. They may be the poorest of poor. But God wants to use you to speak his kingdom into them. God bless you.